Hello and welcome to our moral side of the news, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Sean Kilen with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church. Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Creative Spirits Behavioral Health. Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ, and Richard Euler, retired U.S. Army chaplain. We begin this week with the federal government shutdown.
This morning, the government shutting down for the first time in nearly 7 years after lawmakers from both parties failed to reach a deal.
Republicans once again rejected Democrats' proposals to avoid a shutdown.
The Democrat caucus here in town, in the Senate, has chosen to shut down the government.
Overnight, senators blocking dueling proposals. Democrats overwhelmingly rejecting a GOP bill to keep the government funded.
The bill upon reconsideration is not passed.
And Republicans blocking a Democratic bill to reverse Medicaid cuts and extend Obamacare subsidies to keep health care costs from rising for millions. Already, as many as 4 million federal workers are preparing to go without pay, with furloughs hitting the majority of agencies.
The congressional gridlock has also caught the attention of local politicians like Democrat Mayor Craig Greenberg.
Without action from Congress, health care for nearly 100,000 Kentuckians is in jeopardy.
The mayor also says if the shutdown lingers, it will impact Louisville Metro government services like food assistance and housing programs.
The city of Louisville alone, however, cannot fill the gaps left by the federal government's failure to preserve health care coverage and economic stability during these times.
Republican State Representative of Fisherville, John Hodgson, says the state will continue operating normally.
We have to balance our budget every 2 years. We have a pretty decent rainy day fund. The Budget Reserve Trust Fund, we can operate for 45 to 60 days without any income coming in, so we have cushion, we have reserve to survive downtimes.
Hodgson acknowledges that military and emergency personnel will work without pay during the shutdown, but he's in support if it aligns with President Trump's goal of shrinking the federal government.
The service members, we all appreciate their service. They will eventually get made whole. They will get their back pay. Trump can't shut down the government. The Trump administration is saying, let's just keep going on the level path we're on. We'll keep spending what we spent last year. That's a continuing resolution.
So panel, the current budget process was established in 1976. Since then, there have been 20 funding gaps resulting in 10 shutdowns. Your thoughts on this and how we as a church faith group can step up to support families in times like this? Richard, I'm going to start with you since you're a former federal Army, U.S. Army chaplain. It's impacted you directly over the years.
It has. I've been involved in 5 of them, but a couple of them, they didn't really affect me from a military point of view because of there were other issues that we were dealing with at the time, and it really didn't affect us that much from an active duty point of view. Where it affected me more was when I went into civil service, and on 3 occasions of shutdowns. Where others were furloughed. They apparently considered me essential. And then you wind up doing the work that they left behind because it still had to be done. Yeah. Then they came back and they got their back pay and also a couple of weeks vacation in the process. So frankly, government shutdowns don't save money. And that's probably been proven pretty good in that respect. But I've always thought, too, that members of Congress should probably be the first ones to not take their pay. Mm-hmm. Although it's in Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution says they will be compensated for their services. And yet, I don't think those framers of the Constitution back in the 18th century were thinking that we would do this sort of thing and have, the funding gaps to the tune of what, 20, you said 20, 21, somewhere in there, since 1975 or 6. This is more of a newer phenomenon. And, but no, They say it's going to affect the active military, and it may from a perspective of if they don't receive their checks, how are they going to pay for things like child care? Because they do pay for child care on military installations.
I'm just concerned. I'm tired of the people, the average person, being used as a pawn for what is going on in Washington. I just wish that they cared, or at least did the work as though they care about the people. We operate one of the largest food pantries in the West End. We have already seen an uptick of people who are coming to get food. We're probably up about 25% already, and that was before the shutdown. And so I imagine that it's going to be twice as many people. We serve about 100 families a week already. And so what is that going to look like? It means for us, because this also affects Dare to Care and their amount of food that they have to distribute. So we'll end up providing less food so that we can accommodate more people. And so you have that, and then you have the decline in SNAP benefits and WIC and all of the other resources that are affected by this. And I am just concerned about the amount of people that are going to suffer as a result of this this shutdown. And I wish that they would be able to come together and negotiate, but you can't negotiate on one side. It's going to take both parties willing to do that. And this administration has proven that they are not willing to negotiate, which for me indicates that they don't care about the people that they serve.
Congress has got to be political. That's part of the way that they work as groups with opposing ideas. And sometimes they're so political that they may not want the public to know that behind the scenes they actually do work together some. And my hope is that they will do more work, that there will be more dialogue to come to some kind of resolution and some kind of dialogue. And then even to do some long-term economic work so that we don't undergo these. These kinds of shutdowns, they're not popular with the public. I think that politically they harm both parties. I think that they do great harm, I think, to people poorer in our society. And then there are others who may not feel much effect, but I think it does do much harm to that. And I think there has to be a better way around that, and I would hope that even if it's behind the scenes, Congress works harder on working together to get us out of this particular shutdown, but also even to do some work in the long term that we reduce the amount of like shutdowns and financial vulnerability that we have. With this better economic balance is, I think, something that we need.
So I believe that it should be illegal for shutdowns to happen. And I think that Congress can do something about it. And it should be absolutely illegal that if the two sides cannot come together to bring a resolution on how they should have a continuing resolution, that whatever the current state of things should continue until they make a decision. It is insidious that these legislators would allow persons' lives to be impacted the way they're going to be. Even with just a couple of days that we've experienced in the shutdown, people's lives are being affected. There's absolutely no way that, in my view, politicians, legislators on either party can state that they care for their constituents and allow a shutdown to happen. It should be illegal. There should be just like many state legislators, especially here in Kentucky, They're required to do a balanced budget. That's a requirement. That's a law requirement. They have to do that. And none of us that are not involved with federal government can understand the behemoth that the federal government is. And I am not a party of agreeing with doing just massive cuts to people's lives. But I think that this shutdown it's insidious, it's grand, it's publicity. Both sides are catering to their base, and it's more about the position than it is about the people. And I think that a law should be passed that shutdowns are absolutely illegal. It cannot take place. And if the two sides cannot come together to bring about an agreement on how to move forward with the continuing resolution, the previous resolution needs to be continually in effect.
Well, we see such grandstanding, don't we, from both sides? I would actually say, not from this administration, I would say from all administrations. You know, we just reached this point where, why do we have to have a continuing resolution in the first place, right? You talked about a balanced budget. We all, as ministry leaders, we all work with budgets. We all have limited funds of what we have. We get to spend what comes in. We don't get to spend any more than what we have. And so for me, from a kind of a moral, ethical, spiritual side, this really is a stewardship issue, because our federal government has not stewarded the resources that are placed in its care well at all. And it's not like this continuing resolution caught anybody by surprise, right? During President Biden's administration, there were 13 continuing resolutions. 13. And there was often a big omnibus bill that lots more money needed to be put in instead of continuing where they are. And so I just look at this and I said, you know, it's just got to stop. Somewhere it's got to stop. We've got to be able to say, so if we are where we are now, let's pass the continuing resolution. Let's continue the programs and the things that everybody voted for that are working right now, and then let's have some robust negotiations and conversations to move towards that balanced budget and to get things fixed for the next fiscal year. The fact that we're even here, and it's like, oh, we're going to have to shut down if we don't get things done. Well, we knew this was coming, right? We look at our budgets and we forecast out, right? We know how the funds are going to come in any given month, and we have to make adjustments along the way. So for me, this is just a huge model in poor stewardship on the part of our federal government.
I think it's also reflective of, and I think it's represented by each party about how they see the federal government. It's a fundamental disagreement on the role of the federal government.
True.
I tend to go along the ones that does not agree that the federal government should be run like a business. If you're going to take care of your citizens, it can't be. But there's a different philosophical thing that's fueling this argument and this disagreement about how federal government works. What is the purpose of government? Is it to make a profit? Is it to end up being in the black? Or is it to take care of the people who need to be taken care of? Many people feel that the government should not be in the business of taking care of people. And those are the individuals who are pushing the types of drastic cuts from the premise that government should be run like any other business in the world. And the government is not like any other business in the world. When you have lives at stake, literally lives at stake, which most businesses do not, that is the disconnect in my mind as we look at federal government and ask the question, why can't the federal government operate like any other person that has to manage a budget? You're not taking care of people like the government is taking care of people. And when you begin to start looking at people as digits on a balance sheet instead of the things that we need to care, that's immoral by itself. So I think that it's a mistake that people begin to start comparing, erroneously using unfair comparisons to compare the federal government, whose responsibility is to make sure that people are covered, protected, and taken care of. Not to even think about that there has been a previous budget cut in the previous iteration of this administration that slashed taxes significantly. And so the balance sheet approach is that if in order for us to slash these taxes, we've got to slash services as if the whole nation is run like a balance sheet. And I think that is immoral by itself.
And yet, what do you do with a $37 trillion deficit, right? I mean,
what the previous administration did was balloon it even more. So, I mean, I think that the argument that supposed fiscal conservatives have over the past decades have been promoting is completely out the door, because the decisions that you're making to do the things that, even with right now what they're doing with trying to do immigration, it is costing the country billions of dollars. No one's talking about that. It's ballooning the deficit even more. And so I think that we need to look at the budget and look at deficits. But the government has always been run on the deficit. It's always been run on the deficit for decades, for both Democrat and Republican administrations. It's always run on the deficit. The deficit is not, I mean, an unbalanced balance sheet is not the issue. The issue is what are you going to do about a growing population in the nation of people, with a growing number of people who are poor and who are constantly being blamed for being poor by those who are wanting to make all of these cuts, the slashings of budgets, that we have depersonalized people's suffering. And we have made people to be the equivalent of a balance sheet. And what we need to do balance sheet wise, instead of being concerned about the lives of people who, as these laws are going to effect, all of our churches, all of our nonprofits are going to be overwhelmed with hearts and souls of people who are just trying to make it. And so I push against some of the conclusions about people that goes into some of these policies that are being promulgated behind the idea of having to slash budgets. I agree, we have to do something about deficits, but both parties continue to make decisions that balloon the deficit. I think the only time that I remember that the government being at a surplus was when Clinton was in office. And then as soon as W came in, it reversed, and we got back into a deficit situation. So, you know, nobody can claim the high moral ground on reducing the deficit when decisions are continually being made to continue to balloon the deficit the way it is.
So I want to approach it another way. How do we help the people? You said continue on with the budget. How do we help those people who their insurance premiums are getting ready to rise as of yesterday? How do we help them to have the insurance coverage that they need? They've already predicted, based on the number of people and their loss of insurance, that another 51,000 people annually are going to die as a result of this. And so what is it that we do? How do we implore this government to be concerned enough about people's health care? And so, you're taking away health care, you're taking away education, you're taking away all of these resources to balance the budget. And there has got to be, as Kilen said, a place where the needs of the people become more important, because you want people to have their basic needs met. What is it that we do in order to ensure that? And the shutdown right now, while it may only be temporary, it's the reason for the shutdown. And that is because people are being hurt. Poorer people are being hurt as a result of this, while the rich become richer because it's a transfer of wealth. That's what we're talking about. Poor people, their resources are being stripped away so that the billionaires can receive the tax cuts that they're going to get as a result of this bill and the continuation of this.
Yeah, I think you raised some really great points. I think the challenge that we have specifically with a shutdown is I think it's jockeying for power, because the reality is that the what they want, when we do a shutdown, then everybody hurts. Whereas the extension for the tax credits and those kinds of things don't happen until later on this year. And saying, okay, we're just going to shut down we don't like what you're doing, so we're just going to stop business right now. From both sides, that's not the answer to the question, right? It's like, okay, can we, and I think that's what, if we could pass the continuing resolution that has been passed, and everyone on both sides have said, we shouldn't shut the government down, we shouldn't shut the government down, but then we shut the government down. If we can't have conversation because we've shut everything down and so we can't even do the stuff that we need to do because we're not even meeting, I think it's a really valid question to say, okay, so how now could we keep the government open and let's set into place those conversations and negotiations and things? There's no negotiation that's happening now about the tax credits and extending those things. It's just we're jockeying for power to see, well, who can outlast the other when we stay closed or when we open up. Threatening and closing down, that's not the answer to the problem that we have. We've got to figure out how to dialogue with one another and how, yes, we make very difficult decisions, right? But just saying, well, I'm not going to play with you, so we're just going to stop. I'm going to take my sandbox and we're just going to close it down for a while. That's not going to fix anything. It's just going to cause more problems.
But the other side of that too is shutting it down, shutting the government down, and then saying, as a result of that, then we're just going to lay off those employees because we have the opportunity. That's not negotiation either.
You're right. On both sides, it is not. Shutting down the government is not the right answer to this problem, right? I think back to we've talked about the Charlie Kirk assassination before, and one of his sayings often was, "When we stop talking is when violence happens." Well, when we stop talking, we have shutdowns. When we stop talking, we don't make any progress moving forward. When we stop talking, the thing just breaks down, right? And I think we're seeing this played out right before us right now.
Well, welcome to the 90s, because this is what happened in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Why do you think he had a surplus? Downsizing. He downsized 500,000 employees in the 90s. And, all right, maybe we're experiencing that again. But also on the heels of a shutdown, which happened in 1995. And I knew a lot of people that were affected by that. Now, the other thing we need to look at, too, is the politicians kind of need to, quit doing the flip-flop the way the wind blows. That's all they do is say, oh, well, we're going to go this route and that route. And an article I found it says Democrats embrace shutdown strategy they once opposed, and that was 2013. But then they were in power back then. So now the power shifts. So does the opinion. And same way on the other side of the fence. It goes both ways. If we can get them to not keep shifting as the wind blows. I grew up in Chicago. It doesn't call the Windy City for any reason.
Right. How can we stay committed to the task, right? Let's take our jackets off, roll our sleeves up, and really do some hard work to figure out what we can do, looking at it really from the other perspective that we all work under is a systems approach, right? Of how do all the different pieces affect one another? How can we really begin to look at that so that we can make the best decisions for the people of the United States, for our citizens, so that we can provide, whether it's through the government or through private sector, where we can provide the best goods and services and needs that we can possibly provide, given the restraints and given all the conditions that we have to meet.
But usually elected leaders are not elected for those kinds of reasons. They're not elected to say, I'm going to sit down and talk and dialogue for the best work of our government, for the government to be its best steward, to accomplish its mission, to do it well. They are elected out of positions that they take. And not about dialogue. And so what you need is a voting public that actually respects dialogue and says, I want you to sit down, I want you to work, I want you to get things done, instead of only, I want you to take this particular position and push hard. And typically I think that's how elected leaders see the voting public is that way. Otherwise, they may not act that way. And the voting public may be a little bit too silent on the practical reasons for the reasons the government works.
Well, just look at the voting turnouts, right? I mean, you look at the numbers of people who actually cast their votes, to take advantage of that. That's our right as citizens of this country, right? We need more robust electorates, right? We need people to stand up and to be counted and to let their voice be heard so that the majority of the country really is, to the best of our ability, the voice that our political leaders are going to have.
Well, here's the next crisis that's going to take place, and that's on the helping sector of our nation. Mm-hmm. Because once all of these legislations take effect, they're going to be on the front door of our churches. Mm-hmm. They're going to overwhelm those of us who are in therapy and counseling from complicated trauma, from the loss of jobs and the loss of resources. They're going to be outside of the political debate. Mm-hmm. There's going to be individuals who are going to be looking for food, how to house their kids, and every house of worship will be overwhelmed. Every nonprofit agency will not have the resources because they're getting cut too. Mm-hmm. Many of the nonprofits won't survive this bill that has just been passed this year. The cuts that the administration has planned, a lot of hardworking nonprofits who are really doing what they can to help people in the community will have to close. What is this nation going to do about it? That's going to happen. That is coming. It's already happening. It's already happening to many community agencies where they're either having to decide how to make it, how to pivot, and if they can't pivot, they're going to close. And people are not going to have resources. While everyone's talking about what the government needs to do and how things need to be cut, what about the lives that are affected by this? And the people that are on the front line of this are the nonprofits and the many churches that are there every day, day in and day out, just trying to help people to make it. No one is caring about these individuals. And we're going to be hearing it from the voters, but we're going to be hearing it from the nonprofit executive directors and pastors around this area who are trying to just help people to make it, and they will not be heard. They will not be heard because there are ideological positions that are ruling the day at this point that has nothing to do with the suffering that people. It's going to happen. It's going to happen by the end of this year, and definitely by the first quarter of next year.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in my head, but something I've heard from a long time ago is that when government sort of takes back its human service capacities, the need remains. The need is then taken over by nonprofits and served by them. But the nonprofit sector just doesn't have the money, the resources to take that place.
Absolutely.
We'll have to end it right there. Thank you for a great conversation this week. It's rare that we take up a full topic for the full 30 minutes, but it was again this week. So Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Reverend Dr. Kilen, Creative Spirits, Behavioral Health, Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church, Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ, and Richard Yoder, retired U.S. Army chaplain. Thank you for a wonderful conversation this week. Join us again next week for an all-new Moral Side of the News.